Good evening, and thank you for coming to Nebraska Art Teachers Association's Camaraderie and Conversations. This is an effort by Josie Langbeen and myself to bring new voices and opportunities for learning to the state of Nebraska. This evening, we have Jennifer Wargin, who is from Illinois. And this last summer at the National Art Education Association Leadership Conference, Jennifer spoke to us about social emotional learning and the visual arts. And I was so profoundly inspired by what she had to share, felt it was so timely with all the work we're doing with young people in the pandemic and pre-pandemic that I wanted to have her come and share her expertise and knowledge with us here in Nebraska. So Jennifer, I'm so pleased that you're here, and please take us forward.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. Hi, Nebraska. It's nice to be here. It's funny because it's not funny. Actually, there's nothing funny about a pandemic. I was going to say it's funny because this pandemic, there's nothing funny about it, right? But as I was thinking about when I was going to meet with you guys, I had to think about how has their world been impacted differently than mine? And I started digging right around, like, how did shutdowns go in Nebraska? What was the middle of March like for you guys? And, you know, I just very quickly remembered that this is an experience that every human on this earth felt. And it, it, it's this common thing that we all were part of, and we all are part of, and that we're living through. So it binds us, right, forever. Your students and you, and it changes us, right? This is going to change us. But thank you just so much for having me here to talk about social emotional learning. I totally geek out with all things SEL, just so you know. So I'll go ahead and get started. I'm not real smooth all the time with transitioning, so if I make a mistake, please forgive me. And thanks again for having me here, guys. So here we go. I will share my screen. Oh, I have to hit share. Like I've never done this before. Okay. So that's my Twitter handle. If anybody is Twitter interested, I definitely do and share a lot of my practices on Twitter. And I would love to follow any of you and see what you guys are doing. I am from Chicago, south side of Chicago. I teach at a high school, Oak Lawn Community High School. It's a single district high school, which is really unique. And I've been there for 21 years. I'm an art teacher, and then 4 years ago, I also became an instructional coach. So that is me. So the goals that I have for tonight with you guys are to show you how our visual arts core standards meld together, the way I've combined it explicitly with social emotional learning standards. I'll share with you guys some nuggets and some tips and tricks for implementing this if you're ready to try it, or to give you an idea of what it could look like. I'll share with you a bunch of resources. I put in the chat already a link to this presentation, as well as my documents and lessons that I have, and please feel free to use and share. And anybody who wants to talk more about it, please drop my name. There's nothing I love more than helping people learn how to implement social emotional learning into their classroom, rather than having it as a sidebar, a side plate. Because somebody once said, and they're right, this is the plate, right? This is everything. That's the way I think, right? So what is SEL? This is my high school, obviously pre-pandemic. Kids walking through the school were the Spartans. And you will notice very quickly, this boy has a Spartan, it says Pride shirt on it. You'll also notice there's a boy in the background. His shirt says Spartan Pride too, but that's written in sign language with the letters PRIDE. Our principal had the t-shirts made with every language that is spoken in our school, so that the kids could be represented universally in the school. So I think that's pretty great. I have a nice administration and just a great school. A lot of my training comes from CASEL, which now, I guess due to pandemic, I'm curious how many of you knew about social emotional learning before this. And started working with social emotional learning. Maybe just in the chat, I don't know, I don't have Zoom, so I don't even know how to drop a poll or anything like that. If I was prepared better, I would have learned that for you. But maybe you'll tell me in the chat, like how many of you guys, what kind of where you're at with social emotional learning. I'd be curious, and I could skim the chat too. And I'll just kind of move it right here and then I can see it. So just curious how, you know, what you guys are, where you're at with SEL. But CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning, you know, this organization is one of the when 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 the possibility for functional MRI came about, and the understanding that within the brain there's reasons why we all act a certain way, right? And CASEL is the leader for implementing this into the world and bringing it to schools and education. So what is SEL? And fun fact, in fall of last year, CASEL revised their framework. So their framework was good before, but now it's even better because it meets the moment of what is happening in this world today. And let me show you how it does that. Originally, the definition dealt with, you know, the top line of this, right? But then they've added in. So what is social emotional learning? It's a set of knowledge, skills, and attitudes that we can actually learn for how to have healthy identities, manage our emotions, have empathy for others, and you know, maintain our relationships and make responsible decisions. Look at some of the words that they added in after that was revised this past fall. The word identity was added this year. That's a very big deal. That meets this moment. Social emotional learning advances educational equity and excellence through curriculum and instruction. Like I said, this isn't a program to do on the side if we want it to work. This is a program we do every day if we want to know the language. The fact that we can explicitly teach that language, that's a win. And our subject is like golden for teaching this language. And I'm going to hope to show you how. So let's talk about the brain for a second. You know, think about that kid in your classroom. Think about the adults that you come into contact with every day. And something to think about is this. We are every single experience that happened up until the moment that exists right now, right? That defines us. That's our blueprint, right? And so things can happen and set us off at any given moment. So with functional MRI, here's what Daniel Goleman, one of the original like understanding with emotional intelligence, and then Zaretta Hammond frames this beautifully in her book, Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain. Two books I recommend for anybody to pick up. But Goleman talks about this idea of an amygdala hijack. So let me show you what this is. You have an emotional part of your brain, right? And that emotional part of your brain acts like a guard dog. If you are faced with adversity, something sets you off. What happens is there is a distress signal that's sent, and then there's cortisol released. Now, here's what we need to understand about that cortisol that's released. It literally is blocking the rational part of your brain, and now the cognitive function, your ability to think clearly, to react calmly, to assess what's happening, that's gone. That has just left the building. So if we could learn to harness and recognize, starting with self-awareness, that we're in distress and do something about it, imagine the world that this could become. And more importantly, imagine if you could recognize when someone else is struggling. Wouldn't that be lovely, right? So this is like to understand that idea of the brain and the role that kid who comes in your classroom every day and he puts his head down, think about why. I remember as a young teacher, I'd be like, all right, come on, let's go. We're here. Sit up. Let's go. And then I was like, why? He's doing this every day. No, there's something else. And then when you dig, you start to find out what's going on. And please make no mistake, I don't believe that SEL is giving a kid a break and saying, yes, honey, you go put your head down. You deserve that today. Rather, what it is instead is saying that kid can learn to recognize, I am having a day. You know, we've all had a day. And that kid can walk up to me and say, Mrs. Wargin, I'm red right now. I am red. And my response is, thanks for telling me. Go get a drink of water, do a lap. I'll see you in 2 minutes. Because then it's like, take that time, calm that brain down. Let's focus so we can come back in. We can teach kids to do that. What a gift. What a great gift that is. So if we look at this graphic that CASEL has, what they have added, what's new to this graphic, maybe some of you have seen this before, but they've added more location for where social emotional learning is happening, the environments that this could occur in, and ways to frame conversations and the benefits of it within these environments. That's fantastic. So let's go through and look at what the competencies are. And as I look in the chat, yeah, oh, cool. Your district, Bob, is looking to infusing it into your curriculum. That makes me happy. Cool. And at the Art of Education University, very cool that they're starting to work that in there. Fabulous. Wonderful. Okay, very cool. Thank you, everyone, for sharing that. I was just curious. But this document right here, if you don't have it, it's in my resources for you. This is CASEL's. It's a 2-page document that explains social emotional learning, the competencies, and it really dives in. It's an excellent document to use as a resource if you're integrating. So let's just go through the competencies pretty quickly here. It sounds like in general, we have some familiarity with them, but let's talk about first and foremost for me, it all starts with self-awareness. That ability to recognize that me personally, I'm in distress right now. I need to take a pause, or I need to recognize that there is these things going on, right? But let's bump it up a little bit. Self-awareness also lets you examine your blueprint, where you come from. And if you are able to examine your blueprint, you're also able to grow your blueprint, because we are the experiences that we have. Don't we think that's kind of limiting? Because we have so many more experiences than the ones just in our house. Day to day, look at all the kids you come into contact. Look at all the different educators you come into contact, all the personalities, all the things in the fields, right? We're all so different. But to recognize that somebody does it differently because that's their norm, that's a gift to be able to be aware of. That's why they look, that's why they act, that's why they react that way. That really does help us to have pause. So that self-awareness is so much more than just knowing who you are. It's recognizing that other people come from other perspectives and we all have our own identity. Self-management, because again, for me, I start with self-awareness, but my number 2, self-management for sure. So what am I going to do with it? Here's where I'm at and how am I going to deal with it, right? So self-management is that idea to understand that you can take control of this movie that you're living, right? If you can take initiative and you can say, all right, I'm not in a good place. Here's what I need to do. I'm going to go get a drink of water, or I'm going to do some fingertip breathing. I literally have been teaching my students this slow fingertip breathing, because why not? We all could use opportunity to just calm our heart down. And on the daily, and my heart is racing if I'm going to do it right, if I'm going to be enough for my kids. And I have to do this myself, right? So are we taking care of ourselves through self-management, right? Next one we'll talk about is social awareness, because once I can, give yourself oxygen first, right? Now I can help and recognize others. So self-awareness, that idea of the world does not revolve around me. There's other people here, others, right? And the idea that we should consider diverse social norms, what people have in their home, their norm, and that we create a space that it may be different and that's okay, right? My belief system is different and that's okay. Let's just respect it. I didn't say you had to follow it, but let's create a space where it's okay that we have this different set of beliefs, because that's what a classroom should be, a safe space for that. And we can teach our students that. Responsible decision making, learning how to, I highlighted this one for a reason. That quick decision that you make when a kid walks in your room, that quick decision you make when you show up to a professional development and decide, oh, this isn't for me. That quick decision that we make when you just receive this bit of information with no context, to pause and judge it after you've analyzed the information, that is going to open up so many more doors for us. They talk about, we see so much about the power of introverts. I don't know if you're more introverted or extroverted. I am, is that the word, ambiverted? I'm definitely, everyone's like, oh, you're totally an introvert. Fun fact, I'm really not. I'm kind of a nervous wreck all the time. And I am definitely not an outward introvert. I wouldn't say that's me. I may look differently, but it's not true. But that ability to pause and think before we speak, that's really a gift that we can have. So finally, our relationships. You know, relationships are everything. And the idea that if we have relationships with people who are different than us, that we can truly develop cultural competency. This is every reason to figure out how to bring social emotional learning in your classroom. Because when we create art, we're sharing it. Who are we sharing it for? What is it we want them to get out of it? Or how is it that we want to communicate with them? My students just completed, I teach photography, artwork, creating photograms to communicate with their person. I no longer say your parents, because in my school, many of my students, they don't have parents, right? Yep, we all word, right? Got it. So I say your person, you know, your person, because that's what we have, our person. But the importance to be able to continue communicating with your person on why this is not the easiest or why you're proud of yourself. They just created a piece of artwork to communicate that through photograms. I'll share and show you guys. I was really proud of them. So I've been at this a long time. I went to my first training with my school's SEL team through CASEL. It was like 2005. This book was a book that I received. It was Safe and Sound. We were looking for SEL programs to put in our home, like advisory, like a homeroom. And I remember going through it and our superintendent saying, okay, we have SEL standards in Illinois, so we're going to adopt this in our school. And I was like, oh, really? I'm going to adopt it in my curriculum. I'm going to do that instead. So I started putting Post-its down where I saw that things fit. That was literally my first jaunt into it. So that's a great way to start. Just looking at what the SEL standards are and then thinking about what are the projects you have and love that with a little explicit tweaking, you can embed SEL standards in there. And I'll show you how to do that. So our visual arts standards, the NAEA ones, right, came out, and you guys do use these. I saw that you guys in Nebraska have these on your state education website. So you do use these. But when we start looking at this and we look at the anchor standards, I got very excited about this because what I started to see was these essential questions. That when you look and unpack the anchor standards, those essential questions, do you all follow me, that are with them? When I dug into those, I was in. I was so in because they were written fantastic. Like this one with number 11, connecting. How does art help us understand the lives of people in different times, places, and cultures? I'm like, we're here. We've arrived. This is it. I'm going to make my break for it now. So that's when I started to dive into the essential questions. So I'll just go through a quick process how I did it. For me, the standards have an order. I believe that, you know, I know they're not presented that way in the document, but this is just the way I interpret it. So I'm no expert at all. I'm not an expert in anything. This is just what I find works. I start with responding, because when we respond, we are looking at an artist, a technique, or we are responding to an event. That's the way I bring this, right? And we're deciding, we're making decisions, but we're seeing something before we make a decision. So there is where I saw responsible decision making. That idea that I should slow down, I should think about what it is before I make the decision. That's where I saw that to be a natural fit. Next, I go to connecting, because after an event, then I say, well, what does this have to do with me? It's personal. And then what does it have to do with other people? So that's where, for me, I insert self and social awareness. Then after that, I start making a plan to create something. When I'm creating something, I'm thinking of an idea, I'm kind of organizing, I'm sketching, sharing my idea. Maybe I'm collaborating with other people because, and it's very rare in an art room, your students are just sitting there in their own little piece. I mean, we're art teachers. We talk about things. We have gallery walks. We explain our artwork. Our kids talk about why my color paint is this color and your color paint is that color. So this involves a cooperation, right, from other people. So here it's that when I'm creating, I could be managing my emotions and my interactions with those around me in my classroom. We're building relationships as we critique our artwork, and we give each other feedback to refine our artwork, our persistence, that development there. These are all self-management and relationship skills. And finally, when we present, we ask, who are we presenting to? What's our audience? What are we trying to communicate? What's my intention? And how do I want them to perceive my intention? So back to self and social awareness for presenting. So that's kind of the way that I dug in. And then I started writing essential questions. So here's my essential questions that, and this has had so many iterations. This is not even the final one. So what you're looking at, don't worry. And you all have I gave you a link to mine, but I started writing these questions. And the way I use this is I start with one of these questions when I'm lesson planning. The question may have some tweaks and it may have a little bit of different language for the student, but my planning starts here with this document. And then I turn it into language for my students, but all the while using explicit social emotional learning languages. The idea that so these are just some highlighted ones. Again, the ones that were very quick and easy for me to connect this with projects that I was already doing. Here's my final document where it stands today. I updated this last one in January because I keep changing, and the more people that give me feedback, the more changes I make. And this is not a stagnant, this is a dynamic document. And I would love, Nebraska, if any of you get your eyes on this and you have any feedback for me, please, I would love any feedback from anybody. I welcome that. I appreciate that. But now, I've added sort of the start here with responding. So that's why I added the numbers. I added the anchor standard with my essential question to kind of get that alignment better. And again, that was based on feedback from other people. So any feedback any of you have for me, I would love to hear anything about that. Okay, so I'm going to just take a quick pause. Does anybody have any questions about anything that you wanted to ask? This is a smaller group, and we could definitely be casual. I just want to know, anything that you're thinking or wondering now, or that you might want to ask me now. Yeah, Josie, want to ask?
Yeah, so I am learning more and more about SEL, and do you find, and now that, and I'm hearing the identity component is now added in, do you with your projects, sorry, it's a layered question. I saw the rubric questions, which I really appreciated how you broke all of those down to connect with the standards. How do you, with your projects that are driven with identity, how do you avoid triggering projects? Or I don't know if that relates, or
Josie, you're 100%. That's a great question, right? Everybody, it's the question. That is the question. So, do you want me to answer that, or did you have more that you wanted to add before?
No, that's great.
Okay, yeah, cool. Okay, so, there was a student this year who said to me, Mrs. Wargin, your projects hurt me. That's powerful. But the fact that he felt safe enough to say that to me, I felt like I felt good. I think it's about that, and I've had to, and I am flawed. I am human and unapologetically flawed. I can't, I just am, right? So when I'm like, yeah, we're all going to talk about identity, but when someone's telling me this hurts me, then it means that I hit a nerve when I give them the opportunity to journal and reflect. I have to explain to them that you that part of it is yours. That part of it is yours, because the awareness of where you come from, that's yours. The blueprint that makes you, that's yours. And everyone doesn't have to know that part of you. The part of you that I'm interested in is anything that you're open to offering and that you feel good about sharing in a way that is authentic to you. And it starts with that safe space in that classroom. And fun fact, I have ADD. I tell everybody, because I constantly am like squirrel and making that mistake and all that. But and somebody said to me, why would you ever tell professionals that when you're like teaching? And I say, because I'm going to make a mistake while I'm doing it, and I need them to understand why. Like, what do you want me to do? I forgot to do attendance again. I mean, that's terrible. But what am I going to do? And so I am who I am, and it's my husband, who was a former guidance counselor, helped me kind of think of things this way too. They don't always have to talk about their feelings, their emotion, or their identity. They could talk about emotions, identities, the different ones that exist. So it's create that safe space in the room. And as things come along, you got to keep taking the temperature in the room. You got to keep figuring out, are they a community? Are they binding together? Are they appreciating their diversity and their background? I teach in a school with a high refugee population. And when we start talking about religion, I have to create that safe space, because this is generational differences here that go on in these places where our children come from. And it takes a lot to go through and have these conversations, but I'm willing to go there, and I'm willing to make sure that I say to them, if this is too much, you have to tell me. It's like, what's the safe word? And I mean, when they tell me, please don't show. I had a student, I was showing art by a photographer who she cut into her skin, and then she photographed it. And I was using this to talk about like why it's important to read the artistic statement, the artist statement, before you walk away from the artwork. And the student immediately in the chat privately, please take that down, please take that down, please take that down. And I didn't miss a beat. I just said, you guys, I'm realizing this is a little bit graphic, and I should have warned you that I was going to show this. And you guys, you could have told me, that you don't want to look at it, and I could have given you something different to do. And I own that. I definitely own that, because, that they live in a media saturated world. So we have to teach them, I have two children. I have a 15-year-old and an 11-year-old. I have to trust that at some point they're going to self-regulate, because they have access to everything. So the more we teach the kid, I can't talk about that, the better off we are. So Josie, does that give you?
Yeah, it's really great, because I love all these things you're talking about. I'm like, how do you do that? Because I always want their work to be about them, but then like sometimes I just don't know when I'm crossing the line, and then setting something up for like, oh, I don't know if that's something that I'm probably not trained to deal with that, to help with that,
Okay,
So,
and not trained. Okay, so then
yeah.
I had to recognize too that there had to be a boundary that I set, because one kid realizes that I care about them. I have 28 other kids in the room. How do we make sure that that kid doesn't take all of me from all of them? And that comes down to the structure we have in our class. Share the air is one of them. Share the air. Share who's going to speak. We can't, it's almost like, do you need a talking piece? Like, I'm looking around for something I could throw at you. Catch the stuffed animal. And when we're talking about these deep and they know when we're going in deep, because Miss Wargin runs across the room and shuts the door because we're in our safe community.
Yeah.
You know, they see me do that, you know?
Yeah.
And it's setting up those norms.
Mhm.
And there's, oh God, a movie, Garden State. I don't know if anyone's ever seen Garden State. Anyone ever see that? They're in this guy's yard and they needed a signal for when it was time to go. And a guy's shooting off these arrows, like to see where they land. And the girl goes like this. She like pulls on her ear saying like, it's time to get out of here. And it's like, what's your safe word? What's your signal or something? Sometimes kids might need a signal, or maybe you guys come up with as a class, you say, um, you say, you know, somebody, what's a word we should say if we feel this is crossing the line? You let them just, I mean, I think that's a great thing to let the kids have buy-in into, you know? And yes, the kids counselor. Yeah, Joanna, absolutely. I spend more time now in the counseling office because of my projects than I wanted to. But knowing that that may have been the first word that that kid said, and that may get him the help that he needs, I'm okay with that. You know what I'm saying? We're mandated reporters. We don't have the skills. Get it to the people who do. Let them do their job. And, you know, you keep your privacy. They can keep their privacy. We can talk about it through the generalization of it, right? That's kind of where we're at with that. Okay, so with COVID, ew, a mask, ew. I remember like driving through the Schitt's Creek. That's my favorite show, by the way. I can't help but the ew, Davids, right? Fantastic, fantastic. Use a lot of that in my teaching all the time. Perspective, the milk scene when he ordered too much milk. Why did you order so much milk? I wish you all could. I wish I could show it to you. All right, but anywho, let's be more serious. Let's be pandemic-y. When we left our schools in March and we no longer had our students, it was like a culture shock, right? And I remember thinking, nothing's going to be the same here. I think of social emotional learning as proactive artistic wellness for all. I know that kids who see therapists, that's like a tier 3 intervention. Just a very few kids get that. But when I think about the fact that we could put social emotional learning in our classroom, it is tier 1 intervention because we could create projects where kids are focusing on the awareness of themselves, others, where they're talking about how I manage myself, how I make decisions, my relationships, the way we talk to each other. That is what makes it proactive, not reactive. The fact that so many people are bringing SEL out right now, that had to be reactive and it's necessary. Don't get me wrong. But I just think about the arts have been doing this forever. They really have. So I also, this is the two things that if you're ever trying to say why the arts matter, when you have an SEL curriculum, you're teaching students coping skills. And I'll show you very good, artistic, simple ways to do this. You're also teaching them to be culturally competent because of the voice that they're learning how to have. And these two things, they live in our art standards. So let's talk about coping skills. If we know who Mark Brackett is, he's from the Yale Center for Social and Emotional Learning. He developed the mood meter. If anyone knows what the mood meter is, you'll see a great way to use it. But Mark Brackett look at the date, March 30th, 2020. He talks about this idea that if you don't know how to deal with the lack of control in your future and feelings of uncertainty, that your brain is going to constantly stay in that fight or flight mode. So it's important that we teach our students regulation skills so that they can cope. So think of, again, right? Here's our artistic process. Respond, connect, create, present. Again, for me, I always start with responding. Here's the mood meter. How many of you guys have seen this before? Okay, I am thrilled that only some of you have. I'm thrilled now that I can show you ways that you could explain where it lives in our world. This is my favorite resource ever. Mark Brackett, genius. This is an app you can have on your phone, download it immediately. All of our students have this on their iPad. It's called the mood meter, and it's about regulation. It's about self-awareness. Watch it. So you guys look at your screen. Go ahead, take your finger, touch where you are in the mood meter. Just touch it. Did you touch it? Are you touching it? You got to touch it. Touch it. Okay. Do you want to stay there or do you want to shift? Think about that. Maybe you want to shift because if I'm somewhere that isn't on the right side, I probably want to make a shift. So I'll teach my kids, well, where do you want to be? And then, oh, wait, let me go back. where do you want to be? And I'll have them like touch where they want to be. And then I'll say, what do you have to do to get you there? That's a great skill to teach any of us, right? Is it some, I need to go for a walk. I need to get a drink of water. Like these simple things that we could teach our kids. But I'll show you how I turn this into a whole project too. All right. So last year, this was my highest attendance day in the spring. How about you guys? Did all your kids show up? Because mine certainly didn't. Once they knew that credit wasn't going to count for the spring, was it like that in Nebraska? I actually don't know the answer to that. Yes, okay. So that was my highest attendance day. Never saw kids, one or two here and there at a time. And so when they showed up, I was like, okay, this is what I'm dealing with. And I already had good relationships with those kids. Like we loved each other. Like I was crying missing them. And this is all I could get to show up because it wasn't about me. It was what was going on in their homes. But I knew, all right, you know what they need? They need help. They need to figure out where they are. They need to first be self-aware. So let's just go straight up SEL. So here's the way that I handled this. So here was one of the first projects I did with them. I showed them Mr. Rogers, and I played a clip for them about how he talked about when things were scary, you should look for the helpers. And I told them how when I was little, my mom always told me, look at all the people helping there. That you see the news, but look at the people who are helping. And then I had them connect. And I said, make a list of what you're finding helpful right now. You're at home. Tell me what's helping you deal with this. How can you use your creative angles to emphasize these helpers? So then I had them do a photo shoot. They created photos of the things that were helping them get through it. Then I had them present their work on a Padlet. If we were at school, I used Padlet before, but not too much. Padlet is a great virtual classroom. The kids could put their artwork up there. They could give each other feedback. But this project I did here, we didn't just do it here. There were other teachers in Illinois having their students, their art students, photograph what was helping them. And then these kids from other places could see the different things that were helping each other cope with this time. It was an awesome project. But look, there's the standards: respond, connect, create, present, all based on self-awareness and self-management, how we're managing ourselves. Here's another project. Everybody probably did some kind of documentary project, right? If you're an art teacher and you have any kids who have the ability to photograph with their device, a lot of people turned into objects of isolation, either drawing them or photographing them, or just telling stories. So I taught them about Dorothea Lange and photojournalism. And I gave them the skill of documentary photography, had them observe it and then respond to it and then make this connection. How can you document this moment in time? Then I had them create their photos, create a collage of their images using Adobe Spark. And then they presented it. Again, I used Padlet. Padlet was just it is like priceless, that thing. Do you guys know Padlet? Anyone know Padlet? Oh, good. I'm a huge, and now you could draw on the Padlets. Ooh, those are fun. I like the drawings. That's a great mood meter. Draw your color. Okay. All right, keep going. So when they presented here, I do want you to notice something. Remember, when we present, it's about the idea of Padlet, Padlet. Okay. So notice here, I opened it up. Look at the different perspectives, because you can share your Padlet out. It's like a web page. I asked parents and staff to participate in our Padlet as well. So I love that they were able, again, to see other perspectives from different, not just other teenagers now, but the way their parents and their teachers were looking at the pandemic. That was a nice connection, I thought. Okay. Oops. Okay. Here's just another project that I did. My students, they were, a group of them of seniors were really struggling, right? Like all seniors, of course. And I said, well, what do you want to do? What do you want to do about this? And we had just finished a portrait unit. So there was a big group of kids who, rather than doing some other choice projects I had, they created a book of senior portraits. And they went to the homes of the seniors, and either myself or my students would photograph seniors on their home, and I told them all to make a sign, and they responded to a question, one of 3 questions. It was quite a production, and I was super proud of it. I even did webinars at night for parents to teach them how to photograph their kid. They appreciated that. But it was really great to create this book. They collaboratively built it using the Apple Pages, and we published it. It's a published book, and you can download it. It's for free in the bookstore on Apple Books. It's just called Spartan Senior Portraits. I'd love it if you checked it out. This year, we're making another book called OLCHS Quarantine Diaries. And the book this year will have video podcast entries, and the people will, they'll do an interview with a person, and they'll be photographed in the studio in my classroom. So we're excited about that coming. All right, so if we think about cultural competency, let's get a little heady again, but this really does bring it home. This is exactly why we should teach and learn this. In Illinois, we did a Advancing Equity in Art Education webinar this summer. And the question that I heard a lot of people saying over and over and over was this: how do I begin to talk about that? Notice that was the first question that Josie asked, right? Because if you don't have the same experiences they do, you may not feel comfortable talking about the issues that they've experienced, right? And the thing is, we have to learn how to, and have to feel okay with it. And I know we already addressed this in the beginning, but our safe space has to also be safe. We have to start with ourselves and feel safe that it's okay to go there and make mistakes and learn how to recover from them. That's a great thing to model with your students. If we think about this idea of cultural competency and the idea that it's not me, it's we, and we need to learn how to talk to each other and have a language that we can each understand. So one of the things that I'll do in the middle of my projects, often we're an iPad one-to-one school, is I have them do elevator pitches to one another, especially about the idea of the artwork. So they'll look at each other's work and they'll say what they think it means, right? So they respond to each other. And then I'll prompt them to make a connection. Do you see anything that is similar to you or different from you that gives you other perspective? And they really can vet each other's ideas. The critical thinking that goes on when they're doing this, it's incredible, but they're learning to speak each other's language. Like, there's nothing cooler about that. If they can kind of strip away and kind of understand where each other is coming from, imagine how good our world leaders would do if we would learn to see and hear one another for where we're coming from and took the time to push when we didn't understand. That ability to develop that cultural competency, what a gift, right? And art lets us do that because there doesn't have to be words. It starts with image, right? Okay, so this summer, here we are. Well, that's my student right there. He's an alumni of my school, and he organized a peaceful protest rally in Oak Lawn where I teach. And we have to think about what is on the minds of our students. And it's not about my politics, and it's not about, my religion. None of it is. All what I have to contend with is that brain of theirs, because if their brain is coming in hot, if this is what's blocking them, then I need to create the space for them to learn. Otherwise, I'm never going to get anywhere. So those are our students right there. And like every single kid in that photograph, I took that picture. That's every single kid that we teach. And so teachers did go to this protest rally, and it was not political. It was just us saying, we see you, we hear you. Your teachers see you, we hear you. That's what we needed to let them know, right? And they appreciated that. So relationships, Zaretta Hammond, again, this book, please, I encourage you. It's the precursor to learning. You can't learn if you don't feel safe. You have to understand that give and take, and that idea that we need to look at how our brain turns, what churns our wheels, right? We need to take time to set that relationship up. So she talks about this. I think this quote is so poignant. Your definition of what feels comfortable or welcoming may be threatening to somebody else. Like, you know, like when I'm in my classroom and I do get the energy and I'm like, ah, and excited, that's too much for some kids. That's downright intrusive for some kids. Some kids are taught not to look their teacher, not to look a person in the eye because that's disrespectful. And who am I to say, look at me when I talk to you? Their blueprint told them differently. I need to create in that space to understand that may be where that kid is coming from. I also owe it to myself to figure out, is that where that kid is coming from, right? Because I'm a person too. Okay, so I think that there needs to be that give and take. So this is the biggest aha moment I ever had in my life. I was at a conference with Robert Marzano, not with. I mean, he was there. I like to think we're friends, me and Bob. But there was a college professor there, and it was about classroom management. And one of the things that this man said was, because it was like, how come the kids in my class, in my lecture, they're all on their phones? I don't understand. Why are they all on their phones? And I said, well, did you ever tell them they shouldn't be? And that was when I had this like, wait, he goes, don't they have common sense? And he said the word common sense, and I was like, oh my gosh, common sense is rude because the word common implies that it means the same thing in your house as it does in my house. And it doesn't. What if in their house the norm is that they're on the phone during dinner? What if the norm is that like, or if you say, don't that talking on the phone to them just means talking on the phone. This isn't talking on the phone. Like, right? We have different understandings. So to me, it's this word, common. I believe that if you create common understanding, you are going to get so far in this world. So that idea that we can speak the same language, and just because I said it doesn't mean you heard it the same way. We have to actually go back and say, what does that mean to you? What does that look like? Let's make sure that we're on the same page here. Taking that time to get on the same page, it's going to open every avenue. So how are you going to meet this moment in your classroom? Well, things to think about: open up yourself with what you're comfortable with and make them feel safe. Listen to what they have to say. Give them a voice in your classroom. Take time for them to think. I think, especially in these hybrid classes where I ask a question and it's like, chirp, chirp, chirp. You know what I'm talking about. You know, right? Do you know? Or are all your kids so excited? My kids are like, I'm like, hello, gray boxes. Where are you? Right? So they need time. If I tell them to write a prompt, I better shut my pie hole so they can write. Let them like divulge the information. Again, I don't need to see it, but I need to give them time to digest. Invite them in. And when I say they, I mean anybody who isn't part of your community to speak to your students. I challenge that. I've done many projects in the past few years with their parents coming into the classroom to speak to them about them. And recently with teachers talking about like developing perspective together. And we've made art projects around there. What do you have in your classroom that helps them feel safe? I have a bulletin board that every time a kid makes a mistake, I say, oh, like a kid will walk out of the dark room and be like, oh, this is wrong. And I'm like, yay. And they're like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, you failed. I'm so glad. Because if every time you do it perfectly, you're never going to learn anything. You're never going to deal with anything adverse. So I'm like, great, put it on my refrigerator, put it on the board. And then I tell them, what did you fit in? I'm like, well, what happened? I don't say, why did you do that? I say, what happened? Because that gives them opportunity to think, right? That restorative language. And then they say, well, I used my objects were too translucent, so I need to close my aperture and give it less light. And I'm like, fantastic, go do it again. And they're like, I know how to fix this problem. I'm amazing. Yes, you are. And we own that. So we appreciate our failures. Mentimeter. Anybody ever use Mentimeter? Yay. Let's use Mentimeter right now because you've been listening to me for so long. I feel you should tell me this. All right, I'm going to put a link in the chat. Copy link, share with you, Command V, go. Okay, you have a link that you can click in the chat. And I'm gonna hit Am I sharing my screen? Yes, I am. I'm going to hit present. Okay. And okay, let me see. Hopefully I'll be able to see your answers. How has is this working? Can someone give me a thumbs up if this is, oh, it's not working. Boo, bad teacher. That was terrible. You know, that's terrible. Why did that happen? I'm going to try one more time and then I won't waste our time with it because if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Share. Voting link. Copy link. Participation. Copy link. That didn't work, huh? That would be the same. No, that's the same one. Boo, that's.
No, I'm seeing it now. I had
Oh,
to
you are?
I had to reopen it again.
Yay. Okay, good. Yay. Okay, cool. All right. Let's present it. Okay. So, how has the world changed? Let's see what kinds of things you're thinking. This is a actual Mentimeter I did with my students. Is everyone else able to get it? Okay. Oh, you had to refresh. Thank you, Laura. I'm going to take a quick sip of my water. Mm. People are louder with their feelings. Whew. Oh, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Mm, what an interesting perspective. I wanted to be one of those people who cleaned. I'm just not. You know, I cleaned my sock drawer and it stayed clean. That's the only thing. I Marie Kondoed that thing and that was it. All these people redoing their whole house. God bless ya. Couldn't handle that.
Jennifer, a couple people have asked if you can share the slide or if it's coming together for you on your screen. It's not, we're just seeing waiting for next
Oh,
slide.
oh my goodness. Okay. I'm so sorry. Wait, let
Oh
me see.
no.
Let me figure out what I did. Oh, I know. I stopped sharing my screen. Silly girl. Okay, here I am. Share. I apologize. How's that? Can we see that? Yay. Okay, cool. There we go. So this is a great way to engage your students, right? And see like, you know, this I asked them, how has the world changed? I'll tell you, there was a lot of negativity on this when I asked them this, but I am going to show you the next slide here. And it should prompt you to ask, does it prompt you to give another one now? Okay, great. One word to describe how you have changed over the past year. Now this is fun to watch this come to life. Mm. I did this with my students, and while their first slide was very full of negative, their next slide, when we started to, they thought that everything would be negative. But then when I had them highlight all the words that were positive, and they actually saw more positive than negative, even though they thought that the hardest, that everything was. When you dive deep into this, you could have a great conversation around this about what's there that we don't always see. Mentimeter is a fantastic tool for student discussion and student voice. Okay, thank you guys for sharing that. Let me get out of here and start to bring this back together here. So I use Mentimeter all the time in my classroom when we're talking about, we did a project, what would you put in your quarantine survival kit, right? And they started listing all their things, topics of discussion that they want to just use in their artwork, or can art encourage the world? During this time, I definitely shared a lot about myself with them, and that was very helpful for them to start to feel like they could share and trust me. I just looked at the time, and it's 8 o'clock, Nebraska. So I definitely want to be respectful of your time. I could talk about this all day. I mean, I have so much more to share with you, but I'm going to be very respectful of your time. So why don't you guys tell me, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Why don't you guys let me know if kind of any questions or any thoughts or anything that you guys are having. Again, I want to be respectful of your 8 o'clock time. Oh, I'm looking at this chat. FOMO is the worst. Yes, I agree. The larger words reflect the ones that more than one person said. Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So we could see these common connections we have. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll pick a small word and we'll like use that word, because that's the one that isn't necessarily the most popular one in the room. And so then we'll say, well, what can we do with this? And we'll make it the most popular one in the room. Try to, be inclusive that way, right? What kind of questions or thoughts does anybody have, or anything that you're wondering right now that I didn't maybe share? I have lots of projects that I shared with you guys. And if any of you want to, email me or set up one-on-one time, I'm happy to do that. I love talking SEL, but
I'll plug mine because I'm obnoxious, but
you're
you
not
used
obnoxious.
the term restorative language. And I was wondering if you had any guides or resources, texts that address restorative language. That term also, comes up with restorative justice.
Yes, I have the best. We actually did a training. Her name is Michelle Stowe. She is from Ireland, and she is brilliant. She is, let me just get this link and pop this in the chat. And I have an awesome, this is her TED Talk, and I have an excellent, I can put this in this Google Drive for you, restorative practice. But yes, keep talking. Like what else? What keep talking about it. I want to hear more.
No, I just find that to be one of the most difficult things for teachers to acquire if it's not an intuitive skill. And I have some conflict in my own building related to trying to help a colleague use more restorative language. So I'm looking for ways to professionalize that dialogue, and so it becomes less personal, because you're really trying to teach someone to look at a glass half full, right? And if someone naturally looks at the glass half empty, then they can really take it as if you are attacking them when you're trying to give them tools to use language to build kids up.
Right. I hear you. I hear you.
So I want your mind. Please give me so I can, but
this language, I didn't write this. It's this. Watch this language. Look at this. When a kid, and I had a kid like flick me off and say, F you, Mrs. Wargin. I got one of those, like, I don't know if you've been there. I've been there. And what I did is, I met that kid immediately, they pitched him for a few days. This is before Senate Bill 100 happened I don't know if that was Illinois or national. Anyway, when the kid came back, I met him in the hallway and I said, what happened? Because, and I also said, like, first I started with, hi, I'm Mrs. Wargin. What's your name? And the kid looked at me like I was crazy. Yes, I am crazy. And he said, hi, and he shook my hand. And I said, you know, that day, I said, I'm not sure what happened that day, but that had nothing to do with me. I'm sure it didn't, because I don't believe for a second that that's how you would speak to me. And we have 3 more months together, and I kind of want to start over. What do you think? Day one? And the kid was like so grateful that I said that. But that's one thing, right? Just meeting him head on and giving him the opportunity to recognize that it had nothing to do with you, because nothing has anything to do with us, right? This is a great language. You say to a kid, what happened? Instead of, why did you do that? Because that's shameful. You know, I say what happened because it implies that the kid had thought process, that something had to be thinking going on. What were you thinking about when that happened? You know, and I literally, this is a card. I did a professional development on this with my staff. I put these on little cards and I gave one to each teacher. One of them made a small one and put it in her pocket, and she like pulls it out, you know, because it helps. But notice the colors on this card. They go from red to green. How could we look at this differently next time? Or, you know, what do you want to do now? What are you thinking now? You know, like that kind of language, right? Implying that you're not stuck there. You don't have to stay there, because none of us do. Shame is not going to help anybody, because you can't undo the past. I just think that. Okay, I'll stop sharing. Did that help a little bit? What other questions? Give me more. It's like 30-second rule. Okay, so it looks like teachers, it is time to go to Nina. I'm not going to go to Nina. Maybe you are. But if there is anything at all, my email is here, jwargin@olchs.org. You can follow me on the Twitter. Are any of you on the Twitter? I'm at Snapshot Ed. That's my Twitter. Please feel free to contact me, and anything at all that I could do for you, Nebraska, I am happy to do so. Thank you so much for joining me and letting me talk about SEL. I love doing that. So thanks so much, everyone. Thank you. Thank you.